In this chapter, we'll be setting up the controllers for the hands. I'm just going to select the left hand here and come in a little bit closer so we can see it. So they're fairly simple. They've only got kind of two parts to each finger, and it's only got 3 fingers. If we fold down the hierarchy and have a look, you can see that the relationship between the children and parents has been set up. We've got the palm, and then we have our left thumb 1 and left thumb 2. And you can see that these need to rotate kind of like this, and possibly like so. And that's about the amount of control that we're going to set up on this rig, because it is fairly simple. There's a couple of ways of doing it. You could actually set up an IK chain for each finger and have a goal at the end, so then you could easily manipulate it in the viewport. And we're going to choose a slightly different approach because we've already created a few IK chains. We're going to do it using sliders. So we're going to create some user data of sliders, and we can use those to pose the hands. Some people prefer to do it with IK, some people prefer it with sliders. So we're going to choose the slider approach. We're going to create a bunch of sliders using user data. You can see in the attribute manager we've got this menu user data here. So let's select the very top null, the Roger null, come down, and we're going to choose user data, add user data. This is going to bring up the manage user data dialog, and this is where we can create basically a bunch of parameters that don't do anything at all until we wire them up to link them to other parameters. And it just means that we can keep all our controls at the top here on the null object, even though they're going to be controlling all of these different objects which are kind of deep within the hierarchy. In the manage user data dialog, you can see it's split into 2 parts. On the left hand side here we have the user data that we've created, and as you select the different elements over here we have the properties, and it also gives you an example of what it's going to look like in the attribute manager. So first of all, I'm going to choose add group, and this group I'm going to call it robot control, robot controls. Okay, and if we take this and we just drag it, actually I'm going to drag it out of user data like so, take this data that's been created, we can just delete that for now. So by creating this robot control group, what it's going to do is it's going to create a tag or a tab on here called robot controls. If we didn't do that, it would just call it user data. But you can have multiple groups, you can have multiple tabs, so you can split your controls up into tabs, which is pretty handy. You can also split them up into groups traveling down the attribute manager, and we're going to do that as well. So let's choose to add another group, and this one we're going to call left hand. Now we've got our left hand group, we can choose to add data. When we add data, it adds in an element called data. We can give this a name. So let's call this L thumb bend. We can decide whether we want to be able to animate this or not, and we can choose the type of data that we want this to kind of control. So the data type here is a float. We could choose all of these other data types that you can see in here. Maybe it would be time, or it could be color, but a float is what we want. That just means that it can be any number, basically. It doesn't have to be a whole number like an integer. For the interface, let's choose float slider. So we get the slider along the bottom here. And the unit that we're going to use is %. Steps from 1, and we'll go from -100 to say 200. Click OK. Now we've done that, you can see in the attribute manager we've got that tab, as I mentioned. We click on there and you can see we've got this left hand group, and we can fold that up or unfold it. And there's our left thumb bend, and we can use this to change the value. It doesn't actually do anything at the moment. It's a dummy controller, but we will link that through to our thumb so that when we slide this, it will bend the thumb. Notice that in the attribute manager, the parameter that we've created goes from -100 up to 200. I'm just going to undo that. I'm going to open the manage user data dialog once again, select my left thumb bend. The reason it goes from -100 is to 200 is because they're the values that we've set as the minimum and maximum. Now you don't really need to set minimum and maximum values if you don't want to, but it's probably a good idea if you need to constrain the movement to a certain range of values. And also you can set the slider min and max. So I'm going to enable these, and I'm going to set the min to be 0 and the max to be 100. So that means the slider will only accept that range of values, but you can actually go to -100 or up to 200 if you either type it in or drag on here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I've set that up, is I'm going to take my left thumb bend, control drag, and call this one left thumb open. And we're going to use exactly the same settings, so we don't need to change anything else at all. Now when we click OK, you can see we've got 2 parameters in there. So we're going to need that for the fingers as well. So come back into the manage user data. Now I'm going to take these 2 values and just duplicate them for each finger and rename them. I've gone through and created all of the extra user data that's required. Once I created the left hand, you can then duplicate the complete group and rename them all. Unfortunately, there's no way of quickly renaming them in the manage user data dialog. The naming tool doesn't work in here. And also with versions prior to R21, it adds copy at the end of every time you duplicate it. So it's a bit painful because you have to select it and change it over here. But nonetheless, it's done. We have the right and the left hand user data set up. Now if we click OK, you can see that that's been populated into the attribute manager, and we can fold these up, which is pretty handy because we can focus on exactly what we want to. Currently, the user data does absolutely nothing. We need to link it to the parameters, and we need to know the values that we want to create. So for example, with the bend, we need to know what 0% would be in degrees and what 100% would be in degrees. We can tell that by actually rotating the objects in the viewport here and working that out. So let's look at the left thumb, and we're going to do one. We're just going to do the thumb and then one of the fingers for now, and then the rest of it is pretty much the same. So here we can see our left thumb. If we switch to the coordinates tab, we should be able to take this and rotate it, and you can see that we're getting some really crazy values going on here. Okay, and if we take this and rotate it, once again we've got these crazy values going on. So what we can do to make this a bit easier of ourselves is we can use what's called freeze transformation. If you come down here, you can see we have this option, freeze transformation. It looks like when I built this, I've already frozen those. So what I'm going to do first of all is just choose unfreeze all. Now if we grab this and rotate it, you can see it's still acting crazy with all of these changing. And really we only want to change one parameter. Now you could put it into a null and zero it out, or you can use this freeze transformation. So if we just choose freeze R, you can see it then resets these to 0. And now if we rotate this, it's only going to affect one rotation parameter. And that's exactly what we want. If we had it how it was before, when we're rotating it on this axis, it would be very difficult for us to calculate what these should all be. By using freeze transformations, we stop that happening. We can actually choose freeze all, so we know that that's at 0 and that's at 0. And if ever we need to reset the pose for our thumb, we can come in and reset these to 0, and we know that we're good. So the first one that I want to do on the user data, we're doing the left hand, is the left thumb open. It's the simplest one. If we come to our left thumb, when I say open, I mean this kind of movement. So I think we really want to kind of squash it into there a little bit. And we're going, let's say, 25 to maybe -25, maybe a bit more. -30. So we go from 25 to -30. Now we know the values that we need. We know that at 0, it's going to be 25, 100, -30. So come up to the Roger object. We're going to add a tag. Okay, we could add it through here. Programming tags Espresso. In earlier versions, it would be under Cinema 4D. Or alternatively, you can just press Shift-C, XP, and then it adds Espresso for us. And there we go. So it adds the tag and opens up the Espresso editor. With this, I'm going to take it and just drop it into the side here so that we can kind of see our expression, and we can also see the object. It's important with Espresso that you have the viewport visible when you are working out your expression. If the viewport isn't visible, then this will not be calculated. Now what we can do is grab Roger, drop that in, that null, and if we come to the red square here, this could give us all of the outputs from this object node. The blue side is for inputs, but this side is for outputs. You can output all the parameters of any object, and this changes depending on which object is linked into this node. So you can see it's just a general object node, and it's linked to this null. If we come to the red square, these are all of the outputs for that particular object. So we've got, for instance, the global position. We also have our robot controls, which we added earlier. We come here, we can choose left hand, and we can choose left thumb bend, and then I'm going to choose left thumb open. So this is going to output the value from our user data sliders. So as I adjust these, this value will be output from here. So we're going to work on the left thumb open first of all. And what we want to do is we want to link that to our left thumb here. So we drag that in. Once again, it creates an object node for us, and it links us to that particular object. And you can see we have outputs for this object as well. And we also have inputs. So we want to input into our coordinates rotation P. And let me just double check that was correct. I'm just going to rotate. Oh, actually, there we go. See, I was wrong. It's H. Undo. But we do need P for the bending, so we can leave that like so. I'm going to control drag to create a copy of that node. Let's just double click to remove that and choose coordinates, rotation H. So coming out of here, we have 0 to 100, and going into here, we need it to be -25 to +30. And to translate or to interpolate that value of percentage into rotation, we use what's called a range mapper. So you can right click, choose new node, Espresso, calculate, range mapper. Now the range mapper allows you to input values and then map them to a different set of values on the output. So we choose open, thumb open onto our input, and then output into our rotation H. On our range mapper, we can choose input range to be %. It automatically fills that out, 0 to 100, and output range to be degree. And we know that this needs to be -25 when it's 0, and when it's 100, we need it to be 30. Okay, and you can see that the thumb has actually moved. Now if we select our Roger, come down to this parameter, note that the keyframe dot here has now got this little symbol on it, which means that that parameter is being driven by an expression. Or sorry, it's driving something else. The arrow coming out that side means it's driving. If the arrow is on this side, it means it's being driven. Okay, so now we could adjust that slider, and you can see that we can adjust our thumb. So let's just set that to be, say, 50. As we set 50 for our sweet spot on this parameter, we can actually come back into the user data, manage user data, and we can come to that particular parameter, left thumb open here, and we can say the default value is 50 and click OK. Now nothing's going to change on here, but if I move this around, I can now right click and choose reset to default, and that will reset that to 50. And if we set the defaults on all of these, it's very easy to just select them all, right click and choose reset to default if you want to reset your pose. Just going to deselect all. Next thing is the thumb bend, and I'm just going to come up to my thumb again, and we did do a freeze transformation on here, so we know that the P is going to be our main kind of rotation. Now you can't really bend your thumb backwards very much, so I would say that 0 should be dead straight, and then 100% should possibly be maybe 90, which is quite far across. So let's just set that to 0. Next, I just want to select my thumb 2, okay, and I'm just going to unfreeze all and then refreeze all, and now we can use our P for this one as well. So we're going to need to link to both thumb 1 and thumb 2. So we've got thumb 1 here, and we could actually duplicate this. But many times you might have more than 2 parts. You might have 4 parts, which means you've got to duplicate this 4 times. So we don't really want to do that. So what we can do is we can create an object list. We're only going to have 2 objects in it, so there's not really an advantage because it's still going to be 2 nodes. But as I say, if you've got more than 2 objects, it's a more efficient way of doing this. And it will iterate between each of these objects that are in the list. So let's choose new node, Espresso, iterator, object list. Here's our object list. What we can then do is grab our left thumb 1, drop that in there, grab left thumb 2. This is going to output an instance of each object, and we can then drag this across and link it into the object input of this node. So although this node is linked to L thumb 1, we're now feeding into it the objects that are in this list. So every time that this expression is evaluated, both of those objects will be evaluated, not just the object that's listed here. I'm just going to pull that up like so. We need another range mapper, so I'm going to control drag to just copy this one. And let's take our thumb bend, put that input, and put the output to rotation P. If we come to our range mapper, input lower, I'm going to set to 0 degrees, and input upper, I'm going to set to 90 degrees. Just as we worked out before. And now when we adjust this slider, it's not only going to bend thumb 1, it's also going to bend thumb 2. And you can see that I've done it the wrong way around. Easy to fix. Just come back to our range mapper and we just set that 0 to -90, like so. And there you go. Okay, and obviously that's a bit extreme, but now we can pose our thumb. And it looks like it's intersecting quite a lot, but if we up the number of subdivisions, you can see that it's okay. It works. And we've got these strange gaps, but I kind of like the style of that, which is why I did it that way. And there we go. So now we can open and close it like so. And we can bend it as well. I'm going to leave that at 0 as the default, and let's just right click on the spinners. That will reset to, no, it doesn't reset to default. Normally does, maybe not on user data. So once you've done this for one thumb, we need to do the same thing now for our left hand finger 1 bend and left hand finger 1 open. And it's exactly the same setup, so we can pretty much take these and control drag them. Okay, and as we wire this up, these fingers and etc. might go a little bit doolally, but once we get the values correct in our range mapper, then everything should be okay. In the object manager, select finger 1 1 and finger 1 2, and you can notice that obviously I froze the transformations on these at some point when I was modeling it. So I'm going to just select actually all these fingers just to freeze all. And let's fold down the right hand while we're at it. And let's just do the same here and freeze all on here. Okay. Coming back up to the finger number 1, let's have a look. So we're going to rotate this heading, and it needs to go from maybe 20 to 30. So we can come to our range mapper in here. We can say from -20 to 30. Link that in. And for the bend, I'm pretty sure it's going to be the same 0 to 90. Yeah. So let's just literally select that object list, remove those two objects, drag in finger 1 and finger 2, link in the bend parameter. Even though that says left thumb 1, we're feeding those objects in, but if you want to just make it feel a bit more correct, you can drag your left finger onto there, and of course we need to do the same on this one. So now we have that set up for the finger, and come back up and we just test this. You can see that as we do it, these parameters change. So here we have our finger 1 bend, there we go, and we have our finger 1 open. Okay, and we could set that to be 50 as well. I think that looks about right. So let's come in, manage user data, finger 1 open, set the default value to 50. I'm going to do that for the other open on the left hand. I'm sure it'll be the same on the right as well. I'll just set these up while we're in here. Okay, there we go. Cool stuff. As you can probably imagine, the process for rigging the rest of the fingers into that user data and linking it to our sliders down here is exactly the same principle. So I'm going to go through and wire in all of the left hand and the right hand fingers and thumbs. And once I've done that, I'll be back. I've gone through, duplicated all of the necessary nodes and linked them through, and I've changed the values in these range mappers to be appropriate for each finger. So now we can select the Roger null, switch to our robot control tab, and we should have controls for each of these. So we've got our thumb bend, that finger bend, second finger bend, third finger, and then we've also got the option to kind of close or open the fingers, like so. And then this one can kind of waggle around in between. Let's just reset those to default. Once you've done that, we can select all of these, and I'm going to control drag, like so, to create a copy. Control drag always moves them to some weird place, but we can just pull that over here and bring this up. And now what we need to do is we need to remove all of these, like so. Whoops. And change them for the right hand and relink them in. So if we come down to the right hand here, let's just pull across so we can see it. Make sure that we're adjusting the correct parameters. So with the thumb, for example, let's come to our coordinates. If we adjust the heading, that's going to adjust the open and close as expected. And if we adjust the pitch, that's going to adjust the bending of it. But you can see that it's going into positive values on this side because the arm is flipped, so the axis is the other way around. So we just need to make sure we adjust them in here accordingly. Go through each object list, link in the right thumb, and each one of these, link it to the right thumb or finger. And then you should be good to go. I went through, added in the correct user data for the right hand and went through these object lists, updated these to be the right thumb and fingers for each one, and it also updated each one of these object nodes. The other thing I changed in here was the range mapper, and I adjusted this to be 90. Other than that, the parameters seemed more or less correct. And then I came up to my user data and started playing around with these parameters. And you can see the thumb doesn't look too bad, but when we look at the finger, you can see that it's a little bit off. And if we adjust this or this, you can see that's not quite right either. When we're here, it's sort of down there. When we're there, it's up there. So let's put that back to 50. So which means there's a problem with the rig. And rather than try and hide that, because these things happen, I thought we would try and work out what had gone wrong, and we can fix it, because this may well happen to you when you're following along. So first thing I'm going to do is come up to my espresso tag, and I'm just going to uncheck enable, just so that this doesn't have any control. These user data sliders aren't going to do anything now. Now we can just look at the actual objects themselves. and see what the problem is. I'm also going to select my SDS and just set that down to be 1, like so. So we've got some nice hard edges that we can look at. So if we come down to our left thumb and have a look, you can see that the axis is pretty much in exactly the right place for this to rotate on that edge. The same with the fingers. You can see that it's, it's at right angles. The angles are the same. If we come to our right thumb, however, let's have a look. You can see that here, where we've done the mirror, it isn't quite right. You can see that this is a bit skewed. It's off at a weird angle. If we look at the finger here, you can see it's the same. This should be round like so, like that. So this is why it's kind of bending it over. So what we need to do is we need to select all of these, come to our coordinates, and let's unfreeze all. Okay, that's not going to change anything. That's just going to take all of these parameters and put them back up here. So if we select our finger now, you can see that we have all of these strange rotation parameters. Now we need to go through and just adjust this. And this is a bit of an annoying thing that's happened. I'm not sure why. It's to do with the mirroring. We didn't create this hand. This was created when we mirrored. And obviously the axes have got skewed or something. So let's press L. And now what we need to do is just rotate this around until it's on the right angle, like so. And then do the same for the other finger. Now if we grab these and choose freeze all, now we should be able to bend that correctly and also adjust the opening and closing. So we're going to need to do the same for each one of these. And it's good to just sort of try and align yourself with it. You could align it against an edge if you wanted to. It's just as quick to do it like this. He says, once I've done these, kind of like so, let's just have a look at the thumb. The thumb is out a little bit, not quite as much. That looks about right. And that one looks pretty good as it is. Maybe just adjust that a tiny bit. Okay. Now we've done that, we should be able to select all of these and choose freeze all. Come up and let's try the user data now. So we've got the thumb bend and it's not working. We have to enable the espresso. Now let's try it. Then we've got the thumb bend, the finger bend, that finger, that finger. Okay, and we can open this one out. We can wiggle this one around. We can open this one out. We can open that one out. Right, cool. So that is now working. So there we had a bit of a hiccup, very easy to fix. And now we have this set up for both of our hands. As we progress further with this rig, we are going to add some more espresso into here. So it's a good idea to try and stay on top of it and keep it organized as you go. So I'm going to come over and just choose to click here and choose undock so I can see all of my espresso. And I'm going to use some colors that I'm going to use for my controllers and also within here. I'm just going to choose something simple like yellow and blue, pink and blue, so that I know which is my left and which is my right, and it will group my espresso into logical sections. First of all, let's choose new node espresso general remark. We can add this in and pull this across here. Okay, and then if we come to our attribute manager, we can say these are hand controls. Now if we select all of these, I'm going to just come to the title color here and just choose a kind of pinky color, something like so. Not too offensive. There we go. And then let's choose these, and I'm going to do a very sort of light blue color, something like so. And then when I set up the when I work on these controllers later, I can make all the left controllers pink and all the right controllers blue, and that will really help with knowing what's what in the viewport when everything's all mixed up. Okay, and this remark, let's just make this kind of red, something like that. Pretty garish. Let's just do it like this. There we go. Okay, and as we add more espresso in here, we can color code that so then we can easily see each separate group. So this is all coming together. The rig is starting to work pretty well. We still need to attach this part of the spine and also do the neck. The antenna needs to be set up, and we need some controllers for the mouth and also for the eyes. But for now, I'm going to just save this and we can move on.